We always been loose, dealing off the turf like it was never gonna run dry. That ain't no business. No other game has run so disorganized. Look around. Everything that is taking care of business is together. Dig it tight. Except us. Right. And now we feeling the heat.
Welcome, family, to Fisticuffs. Here on We Got Us TV, we got a great episode today. We're talking about the New World Boxing Order. And if you don't know what that's about right there, definitely I'm going to fill you in. I'm going to touch bases to some historical points of boxing that's necessarily needed because it make us have a better judgment in the opinions of things that's coming our way in a rapid speed. So what I want to do is give us a historical course / a update to what things is presently going on right now. Because if you're not in tune to some of the things that's taking place, you kind of be in the loop of just hearing things, and you might be able to just choose a side. And what I'm speaking on behalf of is the contention that's in the atmosphere between things that Terrence Crawford has said on behalf of the sanctioning bodies, and what is the reasoning and the fueling behind all of this all of a sudden, considering Terrence Crawford being, shall I say, a person who went and captured all of the undisputed belts, who knows about these particular sanctioning fees that you have to pay in order to hold these particular belts and be deemed as the champion, or they will strip you of these particular belts. So these are what the conversation's about and the topic of the New World Boxing Order. But what we're going to do is we're going to put it in a proper context. So I'm going to put some layers to it because I think it's necessary for us to, especially for those of us who love boxing, you know, pugilistic thinkers who only fought in the streets and didn't get the opportunity to get the real grafting of the rules or the evolution of how boxing manifested. When I say rules, I'm not just speaking about what's going on behalf of the ring and when two boxers are fighting. We're talking about the boxing rules, the evolution of rules when it come down to the sanctioning bodies, to being a champion, to promoters and managers, the whole jumbo of the politics of understanding the rules to boxing. It's not just the boxing rules that's in the ring, but those are necessarily too, because we want to talk about the evolution of how these rules came into fruition as well. So I want to just start y'all off with that right there, and let's go ahead and get started right here. And I want to put this preference on the table about what do I mean about the New World Order Boxing Order. Okay? The New World Boxing Order and the fight for supremacy is going to be between a few different factions of entities that have been prominent forces inside of the boxing dimension and the upcoming, shall I say, intervention of mixed martial arts promotional campaign into boxing to try to establish the way that you see UFC. There's nothing like that in boxing. They have many leagues they tried to do like that for a lot of boxers who didn't make it to superstardom level, and those are good for promotional campaigns to test trial the atmosphere out and see what boxers want to get involved and stuff like that. But on an international scale of how UFC did it and cornered the market, it was only able to be done in MMA because boxing has certain rules and certain acts that was put into place that didn't allow what the UFC does in their stratosphere. They could not bring that same template into the boxing stratosphere because for many years, boxing was set up as a wild, wild west in the very beginning because it has an evolution. MMA roughly came on board from a certain level of the Gracie family mixing together the mixed martial artists and seeing who can be supremacy in that realm. And it made a great evolution. So it was easily manageable to control in its beginning stages. So that's why I was able to rise to its prominent atmosphere that we see now. But when we talk about boxing, we're talking about stuff that goes back 1700, 1800, 1900, and it gravitated into an evolution as money and purses become more valuable in boxing under the prize fighting banner. So it was much more of an underground lucrative thing before it became a professional thing on a world scale with commissions and other state athletic organizations getting themselves involved. So boxing always played a prominent force in that type of level of being its own genre, untamed atmosphere, no capstone of controllership. So this is the problem because what the TKO, which is TKO Group, an investment firm that acquired UFC, Zuffa Boxing, WWE, such and such, they want to basically capitalize off the combat sports. And what I mean by that, if they acquired the UFC, who basically grossly about $1.4 billion annually from all of their arena and all of the capitalization that they make from their merchandise and stuff like that, right? So the WWE makes roughly 1.39 billion annually from the same events they do all across the world as well, and how they pay the athletes and their particular in-house promotion. So that's that structure. And then you got Turkey Alex Sheikh, who I'm going to talk about later on, who came from Saudi Arabia, and we're going to speak on behalf of the Ring Magazine belt. Okay, because this is going to be an important segue to getting a better understanding of what they are up against. So when on the opposite side of it, you will have the promoters, the managers, the WBC, WBA, WBO, IBF, and possibly the IBO and some of the other sanctioning lower level bodies of belt holders and some boxers. So some boxers are going to sway to both sides of this particular fight for supremacy. And I'm going to outline, and you're going to make a choice yourself as a fan. So when you're looking at the landscape and hear when boxers speaking and talking and some of the decisions they're made, you can see why they probably made this decision. So let's get into this structure right here. When boxing first started off, it wasn't set up in the manner of how we perceive boxing today. Of course, we know it started off with bare knuckle brawling, bare knuckle fightings. It was called the Broughton rules. A round when two men get in there and they fighting until one man went down. When that one man went down, he had 30 seconds to get himself up. They square off and they carry on. Okay? Now, they square off and face each other, and if one man can't get up because he's so badly beaten, then he's declared the loser. You can't hit the opponent when they're down, and you can't grab them and throw them like it's a wrestling event. It's bare knuckle brawling. This was the Broughton rules. This come from the 1700s into the 1800s and moving its way up until a more perfected style was coming because it became much more of an interest to the people seeing this spectacle of boxing, similar to the gladiators, whatever, it was similar to that. So it became much more of a controlled environment, and I'm pretty sure it was bloody in this era, very, very bloody and brutal. You talking about rounds that might go, I heard some rounds go to 90 rounds. And a round is basically you get knocked down, drop up. So they'll consider that a round, So rounds wasn't basically 3-minute rounds as we would speculate to think that somebody's going 3-minute, 90, 90-minute round. 90 3-minute rounds, that's, you'll die. But they're talking about the rounds where I punch you in your face, you'll fall down. That's one round. And they count you up 30 seconds. And you come up, you hit me, I fall down, that's round 2. I get 30 seconds to get up. So a lot of them fighters back then with bare knuckles was knocking each other down, going back and forth. And that's why these rounds look like that. So we get into a more perfected level leading up to the Marcus of Queensberry rules, which is the standard of boxing today. But before we get there, we had the London prize ring rules. Okay, and this is when they bring in the 24 feet square ring with the ropes around it to contain the boxers in. Because prior to that, they were doing it in barns and salons and, alleys and, little social event clubs that they would organize, stuff like that. Now, the London prize, because like you say, people start getting more interested. So you're more investors and more money is circulating around. So you got much more professional approaches taken going into leading up into professional boxing where we at now. So you got when a fighter went down, the round ended. It's still carrying over what was previous. Each round began with the break, 30-second break. I think they get a minute now. Okay. but now you get 8 seconds standing count if the fighter's hurt. That's still in the margin. And of course, no kicking, gouging, butting, low blows. So this is the London prize fight rules. This is what some of the majority of the earlier boxing criteria was based around. Really mob essence controlled, really underworld essence controlled, not really no sanctioning body controlled or government or state athletic commission control, validating or looking at who's injured or whatever. No weight criteria is a structure yet. It's kind of like making this evolution. Then we get into the Marquess of Queensberry rules, 1867. And this is when they bring forth the gloves and the time rounds. No wrestling or throws, of course. The 10-second knockdown rule is there. You get up before 8 count, clean up, reset. Neutral corners with your trainers. Weight classes. Eventually that was added later. These are the foundational rules of boxing. And they call this the Marquess of Queensberry rules. That's what ended up coming into America, Canada, and even Europe, England, because that's where this came from, England. And they started to more galvanize around this more professionalized level of boxing. So all those prior to that was using the old London prize fighting skills or style, like Sullivan. He probably did like 4 fights in the bare knuckles. Then he eventually came into the Marquess of Queensberry. That's why they say John Sullivan would be one of the first heavyweight champions up under this particular structure, because he did a few fights in the London, but he came to this one and got his name known the most. Now, this is 1867, and this is the now standard boxing structure. Still slightly mob orientated, because there's not no state, government, federal type structure overseeing boxing, as you still don't have to this day. But you didn't have the other commissioning bodies that were raising up championships, because at this point in time, championships were coming from, let's just say like Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson being the first black heavyweight champion, but you had a black circuit of boxers where there was a heavyweight black champion, and then you also had a heavyweight white champion. Now, you had a few different champions, but you also had this thing that eventually lead to this thing that we call the lineal champion, which is the champion that was in the white arena at the time, because we're talking about an era of Jim Crow and, racial, segregation and stuff like that. So the black fighters had to do their thing, and then they crowned their champion, the one who was the man who beat the man, because that's what the original lineal championship really means, the man who beat the man. Not just a belt, I beat for the belt and now I'm the main man in the whole division. It was more so you beat the man who beat the man that held on to the championship that beat the man before that, and that whole lineage. So at this point in time, because of the segregation, you got the white structure boxing, mob control, and you got the black essence boxing, slightly mob controlled as well too. Okay? But that merger that came into only came into because you had some white fighters who wouldn't fight black fighters because of the, they didn't want the traction that come with that, dealing with the blacks and giving him opportunity or sharing in the ring with him or taking opportunity of getting lost or losing. So when that opportunity came for Jack Johnson to shoot his shot and he having to beat one of these fighters, and he was already the heavyweight champion as the black fighter, and you had other black heavyweight champion fighters too as well. But when he became the champion over here, he got the belt and became the champion. But there was a guy named James Jeffrey who was the lineal champion. He was the last guy who beat the last guy who beat the last guy. So even though Jack Johnson won the heavyweight belt, until he fought James Jeffries, he didn't capture the so-called lineal championship to be the lineal heavyweight champion. It's a difference. You could be a heavyweight champion, but you could be a heavyweight lineal champion, meaning I'm the holder of the man who beat the man who beat the man. I'm the real champion. That's why Tyson Fury in the beginning stages at one point looked like the lineal champion, even if he only had one belt, because he could have gave up the other belts from sanctioning bodies, but still kept on to that Ring Magazine belt because he didn't lose, and he retired when on his hiatus, but he still was considered the lineal champion. No different from, even though Francis Ngannou left UFC and went to another arena of mixed martial art, he's still technically the lineal champion. So even though John Jones is the heavyweight champion or whatever they do now, if he retired, Francis Ngannou is really the lineal champion. So until he comes back and someone takes the belt from him, even if it's another platform that's in MMA, not boxing, he's really technically the lineal champion. But because he retired or left out or whatever dispute, if he's still an active fighter in MMA, he's the lineal champion. So that's how the lineal champion really works. Now, this was causing a problem, okay? Because when the black fighter got the belt and became the lineal champion, it's almost like the championship was kidnapped and held hostage, because you didn't have a black fighter that wasn't nothing. You had a black fighter that was beating up everybody, knocking people out in the name of Jack Johnson, first heavyweight champion. So he held the belt from 1908 till 1915. And it was so much with him. It's a beautiful story. You got to follow him because he one of the first ones that kind of paved the way, and you can see the trails that he blazed for a lot of the black boxers to have the confidence to step across the arena field and not be, because, you know, a lot of black fighters prior to that, it wasn't a fighting affair for them being able to fight white fighters. So that left them away from getting real monies, because when black fighters fight black fighters, it wasn't no purses heavy enough that can really satisfy the situation. Even though they had to do it, that's the reason why you didn't see too many fighters like Jack Johnson coming down to fight the heavyweight champion of the black colors at that time frame, they call it, because he was like, there's no money over there, but it's money in these white fighters, because they started propping up this thing called the Great White Hope. Every white fighter that they would try to get behind, they was galvanizing behind them and making big purses and money to bring farmers and old big husky white guys out of wherever they are at, even they couldn't even box, just to come here and try to knock him out because he was of a big stature. So you had this going on for a minute, trying to dethrone the brother and get in control of the heavyweight championship. So now we see the heavyweight championship becoming important, and who holds it, because whoever's holding the heavyweight championship can more so be the controlling factor of popularity when it comes down to the money finances of a prize fight. So now the game is about to start changing now, but it started in the segue here when the white audience that held their champion and was doing their thing, it got roadblocked and stagnated for a second because a black champion took the throne, and they wasn't giving him his fair monies and wasn't giving him the money that's deserved as the black champion like they probably would do someone else. So you had a lot of this, shall I say, bad atmosphere going on in the beginning stages. But then we move into a layer where we got the coming of these belts. Because at this time frame now, the belts that were given to the champions were coming from places like the National Gazette or the Police Gazette, Boxing Academy entities that act like beginning of sanctioning officials that would give out belts and award belts to the winner. And that belt, because they became the popular preeminent force, the National Gazette at that time frame, I think there was a magazine or writing entity as well. So being that you were a writing entity as well, you was able to capitalize on the conversation and the talk through the radio and the communications about the fights. So you was able to make a list of what the champions would be or the fighters would be. The beginning stages of a pound for pound list or a contenders list. This is what the Police Gazette kind of was acting on behalf of knowing the names of boxers so they can be a matchmaking entity in the beginning stages. So this is in the earlier stages, 1800s, going to 1900s. So the belt that originally was awarded to Jack Johnson wasn't none of these belts. It was a belt that was awarded from, could have been something like the Police Gazette that awarded that to the heavyweight champion in that time frame that was following that particular lineage. And then he got this shot at that guy when Jeffries retired, and that Jeffries was acknowledged as the lineal champion even without a belt, because the belts wasn't significant at that time frame about the man who beat the man. So even though Jack Johnson became the heavyweight champion from that Gazette belt, it wasn't none of these belts, but it would be perceived as what the Ring Magazine belt would be today, back then. But the Ring Magazine belt wasn't there either. So that Police Gazette belt that was awarded to the heavyweight championship was the one that was the beginning following vein of that lineage, okay? And then you got the International Boxing Federation, the IBF, the World Boxing Association, WBA, the World Boxing Council, WBC, the World Boxing Organization, WBO, the North American Boxing Federation, the NABF, the North American Boxing Council, the NABC, the United States Boxing Association, the USBA, and the Ring Magazine belt. Now, all these belts, you don't have to have all of these belts to be considered undisputed. All this came later on in time. But these were all earlier sanctioning bodies that came into boxing to regulate a competitive, shall I say, contender list, to keep track of the boxers, your wins, your losses, your ratings, your ups and downs. And they gave out belts. They was acting as sanctioning bodies. Certain fees you had to pay them in order for them to coordinate these particular affairs, which bred forth these things that had things that acted in between these entities, such as managers and promoters. So we're going to get into that knowledge as well. So as I told you earlier, the earlier boxing and sanction bodies that was listing champions and awarding belts, it was the Police Gazette. They was the earlier ones that was listing champions, because you had different classes of weights, okay? But it wasn't as popular as it is now, but you had these belts that they were awarding to different sized men that were winning championships. And then you got the National Boxing Association, the NBA. Now, this started off as an entity that was sanctioning title fights. Like, say if the Police Gazette had a belt that they was going to give out at this particular event, the National Boxing Association would act as the entity that would be the sanctioning of this, to let this title fight exist. Meaning now you got judges sitting on corners, you got referees that are going through a certain certification. This is the beginning stages in the 1920s with the National Boxing Association, which end up rechanging their name to the World Boxing Association and becoming the WBA in 1962. So in 1920, they were called the National Boxing Association, didn't have really no belts, was just working as a sanctioning body to help title fights. And then in 1962, they converted and changed their name to the World Boxing Association because the game had got opened up now. Ali around, there's more visible fights taking place now. The mob is still involved inside of boxing now. It's a lot of finances and big fights taking place, okay, to get involved. The Ring Magazine belt was created in 1922, okay? And the Ring Magazine was the same way. Before they were issuing out belts, they were more so a entity that was listing and having photos and images, you know what I'm saying, of the boxers and keeping a file of them. And then you would list the champions. They wasn't making the champions. They were just listing the champions and putting them in ranking order and stuff like that. And then they was awarding the lineal champion, the one that beat the man, a Ring Magazine belt. And that became much more prestigious in this particular affair because it was the one that kind of set forth those belts that Jack Johnson didn't have. It started to look like this is the belt that was awarded to him, but he never had this belt. But it would be considered what he had in today's time, because we couldn't just accredit it to the WBC, WBA, the IBF, or the IBO, or any of those other belts. We have to accredit it the Ring Magazine, which would be the man who beat the man type situation, not about, because there's no sanctioning fees with the Ring Magazine belt. It's given to you. There was a belt that they made for the Ring Magazine that cost $188,000. So it's prestigious when they give it to you. It's not like the WBC, they make a gold belt and whatever is essence is in it, you still have to pay a sanction fee every time you have that fight. So it's not like you're the champion. It's like you're their champion, and you're paying to be their champion to pay for their belt. This is the contention that's in the atmosphere now. You know, so where the Ring magazine more so gives you the belt because they acknowledge you as being the champion. It raises you up with that, and there's no fee with that. So that's that particular structure of the sanctioning bodies when they first came on board and got started. And then in 2010, a boxer had to be recognized by 4 of those particular sanctioning bodies to be acknowledged as undisputed. That's the IBF, WBA, WBO, and the WBC. Now, all the other belts didn't have to get recognized, like the International Boxing Organization. That's the IBO. You didn't have to have that to be undisputed. That's why that belt can still. That's why you can still have other champions. If Terrence Crawford have all 4 of the belts and he's undisputed, you still could have another champion being the IBO in the 168 division. Another one, that's the WBU, which is the World Boxing Union. All these belts are kind of disregarded because they came late into the game from these particular ones that already had they claws into the earth of the boxing game. So the National Boxing, the North American Boxing Federation, the NABF, these belts, and the North American Boxing Council and the United States Boxing Association, these belts are still sought after. Like, some boxers still go after these belts because it helps get you into a ranking system to be a champion. Their sanction fees may be smaller. Their boxing events are much more, it ain't as prize fighter, big pay-per-view level, but nonetheless, it's still a good atmosphere for up-and-coming boxers to get their name known. So these belt structures are very essential for some boxers who need that acknowledgement of their worth in their travels as a boxer. They need that, and they want that. And sometimes if a fight come on the table and say you get a fight to be the NABC champion, you're not just saying hooting and howling, crying around, but you might say, that might be some extra money with that. So let me go get that belt. So these belt structures, it's hard to get rid of them. It's hard to not acknowledge them, and it's hard to. That's why I say some boxers is going to agree and some boxers are going to disagree. But nonetheless, let's put it on the table so we can just see how the system really works. So now when we get into the real structure of the Ring magazine, represents a unified, uncontested champion. That's why when you look at the Canelo and the Terrence Crawford fight, they did 2 things that day. They actually did 3 things in this belt world. They made this belt right here for the winner, okay, to put the Ring magazine at a much more prestigious level because this was the undisputed situation, where it's the man who beat the man. Whoever win this is going to be the lineal champion in that division. That was for that reason. But then you also had the WBC creating a specific belt because the WBC is still in contention with this concept of the lineal champion only coming through the Ring magazine, because that earlier supremacy of the war that I was telling you about right here is going to show you the difference of how the Ring magazine is up there, as you see. And the other belts are down at the bottom with the promoters and the managers and some boxers, because some boxers want these belts. They need these belts to get themselves up into the stature. But this other level that's above, I'm telling you, is a new wave that's coming in, starting to change the game. So now let's get back to this one over here, right? Jump right here. We on this on a contention of this right here. The Ring magazine was eventually purchased by Turki Al-Sheikh. That's why I want to come back to that. Turki Al-Sheikh right here, as we see, purchased the Ring magazine belt from Oscar De La Hoya in 2024 for $10 million. They already had a plan in their mind of how they wanted to do and capitalize and make a central organized structure inside of boxing, similar to how UFC structure is. So that's why the guy Turki Al-Sheikh went in and got Dana White, because Dana White had the structure of UFC so perfectly intact. But the problem is that UFC structure violates the Muhammad Ali Act. And what I mean by that is the way that the entire operation of UFC is established completely violates every rule that the Muhammad Ali Act manifested in the year 2000, which basically said this right here: promoters from controlling the ranking, promoters from controlling champions, promoters from acting as managers, promoters from owning the fighters on long-term contractual fights or rights rather. And also requires financial transparency, independent rankings, and no conflict of interest. Everything about the UFC, I love the UFC. Don't get it twisted. I'm not banging on the UFC. We're just speaking the reason why UFC for 30 years stayed out of boxing. They couldn't weave their blueprint of what they mastered in MMA that doesn't have to follow the Muhammad Ali Act. That this was interweaving in here totally different. Okay, they couldn't do it for so many years because government, congressional sessions was blocking them, and different arguments was taking place about their invasion into boxing could have been a detriment to them, those other ruling factions that I just told you about and we was teaching about. They have been in boxing for so long and got their wings flapping so heavily that this new entity coming in, they're trying to centralize things, could be a hindrance to their financial future gains. And champions as well can have a discernment against this. But the UFC, nonetheless, their business style structure totally violates the Muhammad Ali Act. Every fighter up under the UFC is controlled under the rankings. The champions control the fight. They got their own managers in that entity. They got they own fighters for long contracts. If you're the champion, listen, all of their pay-per-view events that they do, they don't have to show that up to the fighters because the fighter has contracts of saying how much percentage you're going to get from the purse, and they pay them. So the UFC does pay their fighters. That's one thing they do. They pay their fighters. It might not be the type of stuff that boxers say that they don't get at the level of boxing, but their fighters do get paid and they have places to live and stuff like that. So this is what the contention is about to be about. The top portion that I just spoke on right here, all of them, the TKO, UFC, Zuffa Boxing, WWE, Turkey Alex Sheet, all of them are finding a way now to fix the Muhammad Ali Act, or not fix it, but have an amendment of operation that doesn't violate the Muhammad Ali Act, but still gives them a centralization control. So that's going to take a lot of money and a lot of power and a lot of influence in order to wedge this Muhammad Ali Act, because it's going to be there. Because before the Muhammad Ali Act, we had the thing called, oh, did I even get it? Or I probably missed it. But before Muhammad Ali Act, it was the Professional Safety Act, the Professional Boxing Safety Act. So the Professional Boxing Safety Act was the first act that was implemented in 1996 that was to protect the boxers. Meaning if the boxing had a medical condition and he got suspended, no promoter or manager can still force them to fight under a contract because that medical condition will override that. If they had other situations where, let's just say, the gloves and the hand wrappings and the headgear for amateur, it's a lot of new implementation that gave a protection, a boxing safety situation that protected the fighter's health, not his finances, not the governments of the other stuff that was really corrupting boxing. That part was a aspect to help the boxer have a health situation and not be injured damage-wise like the CCE type thing that they be doing, I think. So now we get into the Muhammad Ali Act that came 4 years later in the year 2000. This was because at this point, I don't want to say it, but Don King was the Don. See, in the 80s and the 90s, Don King had all of the fighters up under his banner with wicked contracts. Even Mike Tyson, you know what I'm saying? Old fighters still not due money and corruption and, mob affiliations and judge coercion and just a lot of scandals that were taking place in boxing that no one was checking and no one could point the finger at to find the direct corruptionary point. So they had to come up with more proper ways of stopping this type of entity. So they came up with the Muhammad Ali Act in year 2000. They wasn't pointing and saying it was you, Don King, but it was because of Don King and all of the, shall I say, miscellaneous things that he was doing that was appearing to point boxing bad. And there was a lot of other people who was catching a bad rep just as the promoter by just even not speaking up or saying nothing. So this Muhammad Ali Act, who knows who pushed it? I think Senator John McCain was the main one that was pushing it, but it basically stopped promoters like Don King from controlling the rankings so his fighters can be at number one or whatever, so they can get good pay-per-view rankings. Because at this time frame in the 80s into the 90s, the television is getting involved, pay-per-views involved. You got, rankings of TV now deals. So these promoters know about these deals and stuff like that, so they need these champions to be up under their abode as long as they can keep them to get this money. So this is what the Muhammad Ali Act was against, to stop these promoters from controlling the champion and making them do what they say do and lock them into long-term contracts and get the manager to engage. So the manager and the promoters was basically cross-pollinating ideas in order to control the fighter and make sure the fighter can bring the best lucrative money in for their situation. And there wasn't no financial transparency during that time frame, and the rankings was so much. Let me give you a bag, to this judge. Let me give you a bag to this particular referee. Let me give you a bag to this particular, building of influence for the crowd or whatever it may be. It was just so much going off that the feds just couldn't come in and point the finger and set up shop. So they had to create something which were acts and from the Congress. And the Muhammad Ali Act was one of the first acts that was pushing towards, attending to the corruption. You understand? So now when we get into what the fight is about with TKO and UFC versus the Muhammad Ali Act, because UFC's business model, as I say earlier again, they're the promoter, the matchmaker, the ranking controllers, the contract controller, the belt controller. And see, all that is good. I love UFC. That's one of my favorite sports as well. And Dana White, one of my favorite guys who runs the operation business-wise, like a Steve Jobs of that arena. I love that shit, right? But what I'm saying is that's normal for MMA. But in boxing, from what we just read about the Muhammad Ali Act and what was happening with prior promoters and stuff like that, is his whole operation is a direct hindrance of that perfect model we see. Because I love the UFC in the way that this model, you can expect them to always match up perfect fighters. Their ranking system is very good. You can come from nothing to something. But see, in boxing, you can't just come from something and then all of a sudden get you a straight shot. You kind of got to go through this ranking, fighting, and get up into, get your name known from somehow, or just have a good mouth on you, or be like Blair, the Flair, you got to talk a little extra, to get attention on you, But in MMA, you could just come in and be a knockout artist. Same thing with boxing. If you're a knockout artist, you still got to knock out the right people. You can't knock out bums. But in MMA, you can knock out a bum, because in MMA, nobody's a bum. That's just what it is. In MMA, nobody's a bum in MMA. It's virtually impossible for you to be a bum in MMA, because any blow can knock you out, any kick can knock you out, any knee can knock you out, you understand? Any strike can literally knock you out from any grown man standing across you that got weight similar to you. So nobody's a bum in the respectable level of MMA, all right? Now, I would say the same thing in boxing, but the only reason why we say boxing may have a few trash cans is because of it looked like you just been working somewhere else and you just know how to box in the gym from your pastime, then you jumped into a fight because you're still a professional boxer, but you ain't been getting busy in a long time. So you look like trash when you jumped in here and you just let that man beat you up like that. And even if that man is more superior or not. So we throw boxing, as bums over there boxing way faster than do with MMA, you know what I'm saying? But the fight with the TKO and the UFC and the Muhammad Ali Act is against this. How can the TKO group and UFC create a model that's like the WWE and UFC, where all boxers want to come through this umbrella up under this structure, this system, where there's one belt per weight class now? And this is the problem. There's one belt per weight class, as opposed to now, like I just told you earlier, it's so many belts around here. And you know what I'm saying? If you look, it's so many belts that this will be a problem in the UFC structure. I mean, in the boxing world, because now it takes the honor and the pride and the work ethic and all of the, opportunities to get me up to a higher stature fighting for a world title, even if I have to pay the sanctioning fees before or after my fight. Some fighters don't mind that because the stature of the perception of how these are the rules of boxing. That's why I say boxing has some rules to it. It's a feeling, and it's a nostalgic feeling to be a champion. Now, when you put that one belt structure in there, it's going to make it very hard for that feeling of a boxer's forever longing desire to be a champion when there's only one belt in that division. But if you get that belt and become the champion, that's probably going to be a prestigious situation if they do get it structured like that. But right now, the boxers need the belts because the belts have to give them something to live for, something to work for. That other system is not up and running yet. But Turki Al-Sheikh, as we see now, Turki Al-Sheikh is now bringing his energy into boxing, which is energy meaning money. Not a whole bunch of wisdom of boxing, but money. And as Dana White will say clearly, let's be clear here. There will be zero changes to the Muhammad Ali Act. The guys that want to fight under the Muhammad Ali Act exactly the way it is will have the opportunity to do that. Or you can bet on me and fight with me under our version of the Muhammad Ali Act. So now, what is this saying? This is so encoded subliminal. There will be zero changes to the Muhammad Ali Act. So why is that? Because they don't want to have direct beef, as I'm saying, the final supremacy and the new world order of boxing, right? What I'm saying is, when you got the belt structure class over here, WBC, WBA, and that particular Muhammad Ali Act version is what they're saying, that you can still fight over there for those belts over there. But if you come over here to this structure that we're going to have our little centralized understanding in, where we're not going to be violating the Muhammad Ali Act because we're going to have the Ring magazine usher in one belt per division, the Ring magazine doing the ratings and the contention and the rankings, okay? And we're going to have Turki Al-Sheikh working as the head, shall I say, promoter coordinator that's putting the money behind the events. And that's how these boxers all galvanize around Turki at one of his Radia events, because the money that he's planning on doing could be potentially a conversation saying about better health care, a retirement plan, boxing retirement pension, maybe a different question about the Hall of Fame structure that was previously there, not to infringe upon it, but maybe give a better implementations into Hall of Fame status or how they consider it under this new element. The way that the one belt per division situates a person like Terrence Crawford, right? And that's why he appears as the spokesperson for this, because it positions Terrence Crawford's voice to reign heavy, similar to Muhammad Ali in his particular statements that he was making against boxing and being cheated and wronged by earlier Louisville, Kentucky people who first found him, and then he got with the Nation of Islam and he seen the indifference of being robbed and connived and stuff like that. So Terrence Crawford, having undisputed in these 3 different weight classes, knowing about these sanctioning fees, but is still acknowledged as pound for pound one of the greats, the undisputed 3 times, top of the food chain at this present moment, pound for pound, but possibly, because he went up in the pound for pound rankings and did something magnificent than nobody else, so he should be number 1. So him speaking out in this particular situation is very valid because he held all the belts. He paid the sanction fees before. But now when you got Turki Al-Sheikh, and let's look at this. You got Turki Al-Sheikh who's getting all the promoters in alignment. You even got promoters that are all now sitting down with Turki Al-Sheikh, you know what I'm saying, trying to make sure that they can find a way to stay within the loop or get the knowledge of what the next move can be so they don't fall out of the loop. So you got Matchroom Boxing, Queensberry Boxing, okay? And you got Turki Al-Sheikh standing in the back like the boss. Why? Because all of them fell in alignment with the understanding of what his intentions is. of course, his intentions is to be bringing a better structure to boxing and help boxing move forward. Because since Turkey came on board, we were able to see some of these major fights that we weren't able to see before, because of his finances was able to put up that money in places where some of those other promoters weren't going to do. They wasn't going to take that risk of the outcome outwardly for what could cause this fight to happen. He took that risk and put that money up. So it made all the fighters and it made all the promoters and managers pay attention more closely to this man who came through, who already purchased the Ring magazine, unifying promoters, managers, sanctioning bodies. So they see him working. But then there's a new world order boxing behind all of that. There's a new world order boxing behind that. A reason, a purpose, an agenda, an outline, a template that we can't misappropriate that's taking place. There's nothing bad on Turkey's part. It's more so we just got to follow the vein of the money. So when we start looking at when Dana White say boxing changed forever, in this ring right here, you see Turkey and Canelo and Crawford. Now, if you know about the WBC, Mauricio Sulaiman from Mexico is where the WBC was established at back in 1963 through his family lineage. And WBC, being from Mexico, was always, the green belt was always, shall I say, a Canelo fan because he's Mexican. So he was always getting these fresh new belts. See that big colorful yellow one? Every fight that he do, you know, WBC make it big and promotion and keep it up, you know what I'm saying? Because Canelo ain't have a problem paying those sanctioning fees. So if you're paying the sanctioning fees, they're going to do good back to you. And they say that the sanctioning fees that come to them goes to help other underprivileged fighters and help those that might be in need with health care and whatever. I believe that. It's no problem. You know what I'm saying? We're not contesting none of that. But what we're saying right here is in this image, you can see that Turkey Al-Sheikh, if I had it a little bigger, you can see that he's holding Terrence Crawford's hands. Now, as he's holding his hand, it's not no homo, nothing like that. He holding his hand like Canelo, you just did good and you win. And I think that my man here, Terrence, he's the guy. And he's holding his hand. But he's not holding his hand, no homo. He's holding his hand like he's my guy. You know what I'm saying? He can do it. You know what I'm saying? Against you if you give him opportunity. And that's what he's holding his hand for, because you can see that he lets it go. And that's like the power of the feeling there. But Terrence Crawford was Turkey Al-Sheikh's man with the understanding of all that I just said about the belts being undisputed 3 times. Canelo can't go against Mexico. He can't go against Mexico and be the spokesman for this new wave movement. He can't be the spokesman. He can't be the front man for it. He sat down with Turkey Al-Sheikh and attempted to talk with Turkey to see if it was going to work out. That's why Turkey was able to give him $250 million, because he was the face of boxing. But he would not make the move to be the voice of the new movement. Let's get this clear. Turkey know that Canelo was the face of boxing. So you can give up that $250 million. That's nothing. That's nothing. I'm going to show you why it's nothing to them in a minute. But that $250 million to Canelo, that's light paper from them Saudis, from where they're pulling that money from to kick to this fighter to take over this boxing stuff. So Canelo got into the understanding of the alignment and the agenda, but he didn't want to be the spokesperson because he would be going directly against the WBC. And going against the WBC, Mauricio Sulaiman would be going against Mexico, and you don't want that bad rap on you and your fans and that backlash and all these type of conversations, what his family and people were probably talking about, because the WBC never did nothing wrong to Canelo in order for him to take that stance like that. They never did nothing wrong to him. They did him, probably treated him very well and with hospitality and greatness as another brother Mexican, you know what I'm saying, showing support through all his fights. So Mauricio Sulaiman was going for Canelo in this particular fight because it would have kept the honor of this system, the old system, alive, with Canelo winning, dethroning the new plan. But here comes Terrence Crawford now, the secret weapon of the new plan. Everyone was hoping that he can lose, and some was hoping that he will win. But if he was to win, it was going to give Turki Al-Sheikh, TKO, Dana White, because this is the first time TKO and UFC and Zuffa Boxing was involved in their fight. This is the first fight that UFC got involved in, kind of, besides the Mayweather fight, but that was more of the PBC Mayweather / whatever. But this one right here was strictly Zuffa Boxing promotion, TKO, with Turki Al-Sheikh, Radia season overlooking it with the finances, and the Ring magazine heavily involved, being a new Ring magazine. And that's why Mauricio Suleiman went out and created a new WBC belt that was specifically set up just for that Canelo fight as well, because he wanted to make sure they could stay in contention. Because he know if Crawford win, the conversation is going to change. Because Turki Al-Sheikh know I got my guy. I got my modern Muhammad Ali that ain't scared to speak his opinion. That's a black fighter, for one, because the black fighters always feel like we got this thing in control. Like how they do in NFL, how they do in NBA, you know what I'm saying? They feel like in boxing, we run this shit. So you can't go get just the face of boxing. You got to go get somebody that could potentially run this shit. Terrence Crawford showed and proved 3 undisputed weight classes gives you the opportunity to say, I'm the man that beat the man. Okay, so now this is the face of boxing. And you got the voice. So now the face of boxing that beat the face of boxing, the man that beat the man to beat the man, right, is the lineal champion, the undisputed, and he's going against the old structure, the old world order, the old way of how boxing was coordinated for many years. You can see here that the boxers, promoters, the managers, the trainers, all of them are in alignment with Turki Al-Sheikh. You can see Shakur Stevenson in there. You can see everybody up in this picture up here. You know what I'm saying? Canelo. You can see people down here, little Mike Tyson in there. You can see everybody coming to, even older fighters. So I'm pretty sure when I say about the Hall of Fame structure, that means Turki Al-Sheikh having a respect for all fighters, in a sense that all fighters came that's old, that's retired. They go Ricky Hatton at the end over there with a cane. So, you know, you got people that's respecting the movements, not just because they want money and finances. I'm pretty sure some of them was fucked up because some boxers went out and retired and didn't go out on top. They didn't go out with a bag. They didn't go out like Mayweather. They didn't go out like Sugar Leonard, you know what I'm saying, who had endorsed him. They didn't go out like De La Hoya. Or even they got my man in there, Lennox Lewis, who's well respected with the understanding. So you got boxers who just because of their respect got pulled in, and then you got boxers because of the accolades that got pulled in, and maybe some boxers that got pulled in because of the greatness that they did, but they didn't get awarded financial compensation after you're done with your history. So Turki Al-Sheikh, we don't know what his plans is, but with all these type boxers are galvanizing around him, is something of that order, which is creating a unified boxing league, Zuffa Boxing. 1 belt per division, 1 ring magazine, set up just like the UFC. So when Dana White say some of you boxers can go fight up under the Muhammad Ali Act, that's the old chasing in the WBC, WBA, IBF, IBO, stuff like that. Okay? And still moving up into the rankings for your pay-per-view, hoping to be a star. But if you come over here to this league here, and you get inside of this league like the NFL, or inside of this league where the NBA at, where the best is at. Because in UFC, I told you there's no bums. It's the best fighting the best. So when you come over here into this league here, and the way that Turki Al-Sheikh was putting some of the best fights together, I'm pretty sure over here we're going to see the best matchmaking, 1 champion per division, not guessing, not 7. Like I say, all those other belts you're seeing is that many champions. And then also, if it's a WBC main champion, they might got an interim belt champion, and he's an interim belt holder with the WBC, acting like he's a champion, but you got an interim belt, and you might not even end up fighting the main guy with the WBC belt, but you done went and had 2 other fights already with that interim belt, looking like you a heavyweight champion. So a lot of that is, you know, was the corruptionary points that was in the favor of promoters. and in favor of managers and stuff like that, and a lot of the sanctioning bodies, when they allowed these different offering of belts, it was more beneficial for them and for the boxers as well, because who don't want to be a champion through this long grind that they've been in? So Turkey Al-Sheikh bringing in a structure of comprehension with his Ring magazine purchasing, with his alignment with TKO, Zuffa Boxing, his one belt per division. So that means they get him direct access to be an entity with his Ring magazine being the belt that's going to be given into this echelon, / it being the level that's going to give the listing of the rankings of the champions. It's independent of the UFC structure, so it doesn't violate the Muhammad Ali Act. It allows it to have its own independent ranking structure system over there. If it could do what it could do. It allows the belt to be awarded to the champion that comes from over here. So it's not no belt controlling system of the champion over here like that. So I'm pretty sure whatever the Muhammad Ali Act had that stopped Zuffa Boxing and UFC from bringing their template over here for 30 years, now all of a sudden that Turkey Al-Sheikh's involved, now that 30-year gap reduces to we being here in 1 year. Our first fight, Canelo and Crawford. So that means money is involved. Money for influence in the congressional state, within each state department, within each, not state department like politicking wise, but each athletic state place that's getting in alignment with this one belt structure, because these athletic commissions, they get money from these events as well. Judges, you know what I'm saying? Referees. So this can literally disrupt a lot of finances. But because Turkey Al-Sheikh has so much finances, so much access to money, it might not disrupt, because he might find a way to compensate and get other people in alignment. So right now it's two worlds that's eventually going to shape in this new world boxing order, right? So if we go into this next little play we got right here, you can see the belts, but you can see Mauricio Suleiman, which is the WBC president, and you can see Turkey Al-Sheikh, with the Ring magazine owner. Turkey Al-Sheikh appears to be holding the WBC belt because that's the belt that's going to be given to Canelo or Crawford in the winter. And that's Mauricio basically pointing it out and talking about what he's doing to it and bigging it up, making it look good, showcasing it, you know what I'm saying, so he can stay within the contention that the WBC is involved and we have a part to play in this and we have a part in boxing and we've been helping out. That's his mission when you got the belt on display like that and promoting it all around. But as you see in some of the images before, Turkey Al-Sheikh would actually, get that belt out of here. And only belt you would see in there will be the undisputed belt, you know what I'm saying, as this one right here, right? The undisputed belt will be the only belt. Oh, yeah, right here. The undisputed belt will be the only belt that they was holding and showcasing and offering to the visual during this particular fight more so, until you win undisputed and get all the belts. But if you go back and look, you can see that belt was readily available on deck because that's the one that they're trying to make the preeminent belt. Okay? Because that's the one that holds the lineal championship. Like we just said, like when you look at it, it holds the unified uncontested champion. Because right now, one weight division got 5 champions. WBC, WBA, IBF, WBO. Then you might got an IBO, you know what I'm saying? Then all the other lower levels, they don't get too much put into the deep rankings like that, but they still consider champions because your event set up, you have champion NABC under that. So it's still acknowledged. So these belts are what is going to be the main contention. Because I don't mind going to see a fighter that I like to see fight and get busy. I don't care if he's a champion or not. It's kind of like the Mayweather mentality. Belts don't make you who you is. It's what you can do and your status and worth that you present. Belts don't really make you, but they become handy because, like I say, boxers need something to push me forward, make me great. You understand? So when you got Turkey Al-Sheikh and you wonder where all this money coming from, there's an unlimited money vault called the Public Investment Fund. The PIF is a sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia. It is amongst the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world with a total estimated assets of US dollars equaling around $941 billion. This is where the money is coming from, enticing boxers to choose a side. So this is the scenario we facing. This is the green building right here. That green building you see right in the middle, poking up, that is the PIF building, the Public Investment Fund. Okay, and Turki Al-Sheikh is the chairman of that particular building. So if you look right here, he's the where is it at right here? What we got right here? See, he's the chairman of the General Entertainment Authority of Saudi Arabia, the government department advisor at the royal court. He actually sits next to the Crown Prince Solomon, who's actually the Crown Prince de facto because his father is the king, but he's the Crown Prince, and he's the one that's kind of running the show right now. Now, a lot of the bad rap that the Saudis was getting was because of some of the incidents that happened not too long ago, probably a few years back when he first became the Crown Prince. You know, when he first became the Crown Prince, you know, in Saudi Arabia, and he got on the throne, it's almost like you're going to come through and put into check all of these corruptionary, out-of-pocket people who've been doing what they want to do before I get here. So as soon as the Crown Prince got there, he did a lot of chin checking with a lot of people in Saudi Arabia that was rich in wealth and had offshore accounts and lined them up as corrupting people. And Turki Al-Sheikh was working on the ground level with that. He was a groundsman moving around helping the Crown Prince at that time frame find those particular culprits and do whatever they had to do with them, you know, and like a few of them got locked up in prison and stuff like that. But Turki Al-Sheikh was involved in that particular movement as the Crown Prince was consolidating his power in his new position as Crown Prince. And the authority that he had, he superseded all these other people and positioned himself. And that's what so-called the Turki Al-Sheikh was awarded power later on after that, part of the royal court, and got into this position right here to have access to that $941 billion fund to bring up the, shall I say, they call it sports washing. I don't call it that. But this is what the world call it when they want to have a beef with a country because they don't like the inside human rights activity may take place or whatever, right? So they say that Saudi Arabia is doing a lot of sports washing. They come in and buy up and put money into a lot of the sports and make it seem like they full the movement of the sport and helping out the sport, helping out the boxers and doing all this other stuff. But really they coming in just to do a sports washing, which is just to try to clean up the image that they got in their country that's being spread around. So by you coming in and putting money out like that, you don't think about what's going on in their country for their human right activity. You think about what's going on from how they can do for you, what they're doing for money, how they taking over. So when I say the New World Boxing Order, it's not that aspect. It's the New World Boxing Order in the sense of that money that comes from that. That's not necessarily sports washing. It's necessarily coming here creating a one unified entity, as we just said right here, as you look at it, a unified boxing league. And UFC is the Zuffa boxing that's behind that. The structure, they're using the UFC Zuffa boxing structure of MMA to bring it into boxing. So Turki Al-Sheikh has a great deal of respect for Dana. As you see right here, they sit down having deals, talking and stuff, and he knew that Dana can get the job done. So that's what this is taking place. Dana is stepping up to get the job done to set this New World Boxing Order up where it's going to be set up like a UFC structure. It's not going to violate the Muhammad Ali Act because the Ring magazine is going to be the one that's going to list the champions, set up the rankings and the contentions and stuff like that, and they're going to award the belts to the winner. However they do their matchmaking, that's just nothing, but there's going to be no promoters and no managers all intertwining in between this scenario. So it's going to eliminate the WBC, the WBA, the WBO, the IBF, and all those other things. It's going to eliminate majority of the head promotional company as you speak about. So you're not going to be saying De La Hoya Promotions or Golden Boy Promotions. You're not going to be saying Matchroom. You're not going to be saying Premier Boxing. You're not going to be saying, Queensbury Boxing. You're not going to be saying none of them stuffs. And you're not going to be saying none of these Mayweather Promotion and or even none of these other levels. You might have a piece of a company to get a piece of something, but if you come up under this UFC structure, it's going to be a totally different ball game. And that's what a lot of boxers are going to have to make a decision on. some are not going to want to go because it's going to look like it's going to take some of your sovereignty away, because now it's going to look like a job. When a football player get $120 million for whatever amount of years that he got to be on his team, he has to come up and show up at the training, practice, and stuff, because you are now on salary. You are now have a job. You have now a job that signifies something. But when you just a freelance boxer, right, or just your own agent, and you're not part of a organized professional system where you have to show up, be on point, be on time, you got training, I'm pretty sure they're going to give new. Think about this, though. All these boxers got boxing gyms out here in the world, and they got their way of doing their thing. But then the UFC got a performance enhanced training facility for UFC people to get a one up in their training, education, and training. They may have to pay for some of that, you know what I'm saying, from their monies and stuff, because I'm pretty sure it's a business. But nonetheless, you got an opportunity to go to a place to get enhanced training. If they start creating boxing scenario gyms and enhanced performance centers where boxers can get updated and upgraded at the level of performance, how they got this new system set up, a lot of boxers going to jump ship to want to come over there and learn that. Because once again, those same impoverished boxers that eventually always have dreams to be a champion, they're going to want to rise up one day and get to a level of getting a belt. It might be hard going through that old Muhammad Ali Act version way, because we could look now that it's not that many champions that can go up to the flock. It's just you become a champion, you lose it. You become a champion, you ain't got it no more. You know what I'm saying? Stephen Fulton, Schoolboy, just took a L. You know what I'm saying? Other young boy, you know what I'm saying? Foster done went up. So it can happen, you know, and you got to, once that ranking fall, one thing about boxing is, unlike MMA, you can lose a fight in MMA in that structure they got and be right back next, like Izzy. Izzy lost a few fights, but he could fight tomorrow and got fans, will be right back, and he'll catch a win. He right back on top just like that. That's the respectability that UFC got for, that's why I say nobody is bums. Over here in boxing, you catch one L, you get an O on your record, you feel like you a bum. You feel like your whole reign is over towards getting toward these belts and stuff. So trying to harbor and hold on to a belt is a mindset that been in boxing. So it's going to be hard to break and bring the new world boxing order on the table up on a new structure, even though I'm going to be looking for Dana to do this and Zuffa Boxing and the Ring Magazine and see who's going to be the first champions over there. I want to see it. Who's going to be the first champions over there that's going to be acknowledged, because now somehow they're going to have to take the lineal championship of over there into this. And when that happened, that's when that boxing dies. So whenever the lineal championship of the old Muhammad Ali Act version get a chance to fight for this in here, I don't care what belt's under it, and you now get this ring belt, you're going to be the new lineal champion. So once the lineal championship eventually in time come into this new structure, the old boxing is dead with the belts. I'm going to sign off like that, y'all. I want to thank y'all for tuning in, you know what I'm saying? And I appreciate y'all. Hope y'all got to understand the new world boxing order, you know? And this is, like I say, you just look at the sides. Look at what I said and start looking around. You will see that these are the battles right now. You got some boxers on both sides, okay? So we just got this look at the thing. So I once again salute to y'all. Appreciate y'all tuning in. You know what I'm saying? This is Fist of Cuffs on We Got Us TV.
We always been lost, dealing off the turf like it was never gonna run dry. That ain't no business. No other game has run so disorganized. Look around. Everything that is taking care of business is together. Dig it tight. Except us.